about injury prevention in Brazilian women's football, perception of physiotherapists, and practices within elite clubs. So this is the first page of our article. So for the introduction, so this article talks about prevention of injuries in women's football teams and head physio's opinion and feedback in Brazil. Football has always been like a big thing in Brazil, but women's football has been growing over the years, and it's played in more than 100 countries right now. So due to the evolution, the sport has been starting to be highly physically demanding for the players, which usually increases the risk of injuries. Previous studies have seen greater occurrence of severe injuries in sports. Two main injuries were ACL ruptures and ankle sprains, followed by hamstring strains. Not that many articles talk about the injury preventions due to like sex barriers between female and male athletes in soccer. So the purpose of the research today was to look at the injury prevention strategies used in women's football teams, as well as to investigate the different opinions of multiple physiotherapists. And then the article basically breaks down the specific needs, barriers, preventions, and injuries of multiple teams during the year of 2021. So here are just previous researches. So it was seen that female players do not have as many physiotherapists and healthcare workers, which create barriers for actual injury prevention programs, which was talked about bullying in 2018. And they do not have as much money that the men's teams get, which has a big impact on the physical health of athletes as well as the performance and their safety. So in the introduction of the article, it included multiple studies that relate to highlighting injury rates and the difference between genders. So Orange study from 2023 reported a football injury rate of 5.63 injuries per 1,000 hours, while Lopez Valenciano in 2020 found a higher rate of 8.1 in men's football. So this is highlighting gender differences in injury patterns. So by taking this gender-specific aspects into account, physiotherapists and club employees can create more successful injury prevention programs that meets all the demands of women's football teams and players. So for this specific article, we didn't have any hypotheses. So I made two that could be talked about. So Elite Brazilian Women's Football Club with specialized injury prevention programs led by physiotherapists will report reduced injury incidence rates and faster recovery periods. So that's my first hypothesis. And the second one is ACL injuries, ankle sprains, and hamstring strains will be less common in elite Brazilian women's football teams that use multi-component injury prevention programs that incorporate strength training, flexibility, and balancing exercises. So the main problem was not enough Brazilian physiotherapists, health worker, and athletics therapists worked for the female athletes. So they don't get the chance to have an injury prevention program. Female teams often operate with reduced fundings, limiting their access to advanced training tools compared to the men's team who always get more money. So the goal was to reduce all the problems listed. So also to increase research on women's soccer in general, because we do not see as much and we don't really talk about it as much, and as well as developing injury prevention programs to the female athletes and increase the work done by the physiotherapist. And as well as receiving proper instruction for preventing those injuries during like seasons. So yeah.
Okay, so researchers sent emails or got in contact with all 52 clubs that participated in the 2021 Brazilian Women's Football Championship, consisting of 16 clubs for the A1 series, so the first national division, and 36 clubs from the A2 series, the second national division. And then head therapists from all 52 clubs were asked to participate in the study, with 32 therapists expressing interest, with 16 from the A1 series and 16 from the A2. The independent variables in this study were the head physiotherapist characteristics, including their experience and workplace details. The dependent variables were the injury prevention practices and perceptions. Researchers wanted to examine the best injury prevention practices and biggest risk factors among head therapists in Brazilian women's football. Okay, so methodology and material. So participants were given questionnaires that were divided into 4 sections consisting of multiple choice questions, including 1 physiotherapist profile, 2 workplace details, 3 perceptions towards injury prevention, and 4 practices towards injury prevention. Materials included the online questionnaire previously described that were sent to physiotherapists interested in participating in the study. So this is just the questionnaire that was given out to the participants that participated. So overview. So responses from the online questionnaire were uploaded to an Excel spreadsheet to interpret. So looking at risk factors and prevention strategies, the study used a Likert scale to better explain findings, giving 0, 1, 2, or 3 points towards injury, towards different responses, giving 0 points to answers rated as not important, 1 point to answers given rated as somewhat important, 2 to answers given as important, and 3 to very important. Looking at the target injuries to be addressed by prevention programs, answers were ranked from 1 to 5, 5 being first and 1 being last. The same rating scale mentioned was used to examine the greatest barriers when implementing these strategies. So this first one just shows ACL injuries as the primary target for prevention, followed by ankle sprains, hamstring strains, and quadricep strains. Sorry, I'm a mess. Okay. Injury, so this table shows the highest injury risk factors for women returning to sport agreed upon by physiotherapists working with Brazilian women's football. So they found that early return to sport after an injury was ranked the highest injury risk factor, with other closely scored risk factors including too high a workload, having previous injury, poor sleep, rest, muscle strength, power deficits, just to name a few. Okay, so prevention strategies. So this was the most important prevention strategy of physiotherapists who completed this survey in women's football was the adoption of return to sport criteria, followed by preseason risk factor screening and extrinsic exercises. So the greatest barriers included lack of time due to training, match schedule, insufficient number of practitioners in the club, low support from the club board, and the greatest barrier being poor infrastructure. So injury risk screening, this figure shows body composition evaluation is the most common screening mechanism for injury risk among these practitioners in Brazilian women's football. Strategies found that flexibility and mobility exercises were the most used strategy for injury prevention, followed by stability, balance, and proprioception exercises as the second most common. So they found the most common program type used was a combination of both collective prevention and individual prevention. And a physiotherapist was present in all 23 of the programs, or in all 31 of the programs, sorry. And 23 of the programs also had an S&C coach. So they found that 31 out of 32 clubs used the prevention programs to help. and that they were most commonly performed 3 times a week during preseason and 2 times a week during in-season.
So knowledge translation, high-risk injuries were identified. So ACL ruptures are on top priority for injury prevention, given their severity and their long-time consequences, and also a high reoccurrence rate, especially within female soccer athletes. Also, ankle sprains and hamstring strains are also a significant concern due to their frequency and impact on the player's performance themselves. For risk factors, modifiable risks include early return to sport after injury, excessive workload, poor sleep, muscle and strength, power deficits. Some more factors like external factors such as like poor infrastructure and limited staff support present during additional challenges, so like lack of ATs, for example. And also effective prevention strategies, multiple component exercise programs, and like including like strength training, eccentric training, and like traditional exercises, working on flexibility, proprioception, sprinting, and also just systemic risk factor screenings like range of motion, balance, aerobic testing. Having all that prevention in place goes a long way. So the discussion of the findings, and starting off with the interpretation of the findings, we found that physiotherapists identified modifiable factors like premature return to sport, excessive workload while working through rehabilitation, poor sleep and rest as a factor, and muscle strength deficits as a major injury risk. Also, multi-component exercise programs, risk factor screening, and adherence return to sport criteria were highlighted as essential prevention strategies. The prioritization of ACL injury prevention aligns with higher incidence-free injury rates, especially in female soccer athletes, compared to males. Physiotherapists also understood both the biomechanical, and contextual factors affecting female players. Yeah, so the clinical application of the findings, definitely tailoring programs to include interventions like eccentric exercises, and sprint training can help reduce the risk of hamstring strains and further ACL injuries. Individual programs based on the player's specific need. So obviously tailoring the workouts and the exercises and the rehab for the athlete, as well as involving other like scientific sport athletes. They're not athletes, sorry. Professionals, including like sport nutritionists, recovery modality people, like massage therapists, and psychological support also is a big thing to help optimize the players' outcomes. The limitations to the study, just starting off, sampling and generalization. This study only surveyed head physiotherapists from elite Brazilian women's football clubs. Finding may not be the same in other countries or other competition levels. So it may be different throughout different competition levels and throughout different countries. Perspectives bias. The views of physiotherapists may not reflect those of other stakeholders. So like coaches or players could have a very different investment into the players than the ATs or the physios. that could potentially limit the comprehensive finding of the data. Cross-sectional design of the study itself. Current practices show that the study does not show the causal relationship between intervention and injury rates. And then questions we have come up with about the study themselves. So for longitudinal outcomes, what are the long-term career impacts of injury prevention programs on players' professional trajectories and health? Comparative effectiveness of prevention programs. How do multi-component exercise programs in women's football or soccer compare with single component programs in reducing injury rates? And psychosocial factors in injury risk. So what role do psychological stressors and team dynamics play in injury susceptibility among female athletes? And that's it.
Perfect. All right, thank you.